Hello, welcome to the Bigger Truth Show. This is episode 2, and I am really excited to be interviewing Mellissa Carone today. Mellissa was a whistleblower. She actually worked for Dominion. She was in the absentee ballot counting center in Detroit on November 3rd and 4th, 2020. And she was one of Rudy Giuliani's key witnesses in the event that he set up here in Michigan that was similar to events that he set up in other states that were where witnesses were testifying to the joint sessions of the state legislature to, about the alleged election fraud. And so she witnessed a lot of stuff. And I think we're going to have, we talked the other day and we had a great conversation, and I look forward to talking to her. And I think, and also fielding your questions as well. And I've had some interesting questions already before Mellissa even came on, or agreed to come on, just about, am I abandoning my prior stance that there was no machine fraud? And that's one of the things that we're going to look at. I think that you'll find that I've been consistent. But here we go. With no further ado, Mellissa, welcome to the Bigger Truth Show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming on. Really glad to have you. You just disappeared. Are you still there? Okay. While we're waiting for Mellissa, hang on just a minute. I'm just going to text her. There is one thing that I really want to share that I want to summarize from my last, and I'm going to summarize it very briefly from my last episode, which is, I showed how Jovan Pulitzer, Patrick Colbeck, Mike Lindell, many others within kind of the Flynn orbit, or I call it the Flynn network, are promoting the idea, saying that if we vote early, that we are helping the Democrats. So they're really trying to get as many people as they can to vote on election day. They say you got to vote on election day. Now the Lindell plan is very interesting, and if we really think it through, I think it's counterproductive. The Lindell plan is to take to request an absentee ballot and then to bring it on election day. And if they tell you that you've already voted, then you've got the proof that you haven't, because you've got your absentee ballot in the envelope and you've got the proof that you haven't voted yet. And this is, and then if you have voted, then they tell you to call the police and file an identity theft complaint there at the polling center, which is something that could cause delays in the polling center. Obviously, if this is something that catches fraud, it's a good thing. I've argued that I don't think that it's likely to catch fraud, because unless you're somebody that hasn't voted before. Now, I think it's hard enough to encourage somebody who hasn't voted before to vote, and you're also telling them to try to set a trap. I think that that's a really difficult thing. And then even further, Jovan Pulitzer is actually saying that he's encouraging people to file temporary restraining orders if the polling center workers can't prove that there are no illegal immigrants voting on that day. They're telling them to go to a court and file an emergency TRO to stop the polling, to stop the vote counting at the election center. So they're telling everybody to go vote on election day. And then they're also telling all of their followers to delay counting, to stop, to create disruptions on election day at the polling centers. I think that this is a huge issue. I don't see anybody talking about it. And it really proves that there's something seriously nefarious going on. So I think that's a really important thing to share. It looks like Melissa's back on. All right. Are you there?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Stuff happens. So again, so glad that you're here, Mellissa. And I have kind of introduced you. I talked a little bit about some of the issues that we've had on or that seem to be occurring as far as people promoting voting only on election day, and then also promoting ideas that would cause delays and obstruction and potential chaos on election day. But really, and it kind of relates to what this is something I talked about on Monday, but it relates to your story in a way, because you worked for Dominion and you witnessed just a lot of stuff on election day at TCF Center, which is the big mega absentee ballot counting center. And I hope to talk about what you saw as far as where you saw fraud, and then even more so, I want to talk about, and I looked forward to exploring how the Flynn orbit kind of, what your experience was with them after that, because you did have quite a bit of experience with Pete Santelli and others in after that, and even with General Flynn himself. So I look forward to talking about that, and we'll just see where this goes. So I'm really grateful that you're here, and I've been looking forward to this for since before we even talked. I've been wanting to talk to you. So
yeah, and I'm really happy to be here. So as far as like working, with Dominion and on election day, and I want to say that was the first election I've ever worked. But you can still tell, when something is wrong, when people shouldn't be doing something, when people aren't trained, when you have two Democrats at an adjudication machine. And I also had a friend that I have known for over 20 years that was working that election. And I had spoken with him, and it was just quite strange because he had told me that he was never trained, at least not on the tabulation process. And that's what he was working that for 12 hours. So yeah, but I'll start.
Or a Dominion employee that was never trained?
He was with the city.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I want to say that I think the most important thing, is there something you were going to say, Scott?
No, I'm listening.
Okay. Is that, these people weren't trained, like I said, and they were scanning these ballots over and over without discarding them. And that's a big problem because it's double scanning the ballots. Now, we don't know if those ballots are really getting counted. We can't really prove that, but that is something I witnessed happen for, 18, 19 hours straight, which was quite concerning.
And the way that I understood that, as we were talking before, is so they might have a big batch of ballots, right?
Yeah.
That they're running through the tabulator. And these tabulators, they're just all they are is just a super fast big scanner, right?
Yeah.
And so they'd have a huge stack, and there might be how many, like 100,000, 50. Okay, so there's 50. So 50 in a big stack. And so they run that stack through, and then you saw them run it through again.
Yeah.
But they'd run it through partially, and then they'd run it through again.
So one of them would get jammed, like say in the middle of, and what they should have done was discard that entire batch and rescan them all, but they would not discard them and just continue rescanning them, which would then rescan the first half that they scanned already.
Sure. So if 20 had already been counted, they needed to zero it out so that those wouldn't be counted again. They wouldn't do that. They just put the whole batch of 50 in there. And then, as far as you could tell, they likely were counted. Those first 20 were just counted again. And
from what I knew. Yeah.
Right. And so another thing is, so you said that you talked to one person that wasn't trained, but there were several that, a lot of people, and I talked to others that had been there and that witnessed that the poll workers just seemed to be very poorly trained. They didn't really know.
Yeah, they were really poorly trained. Like I said, I had a friend for 20 years that I knew, and I was talking to him, and he was actually working with his girlfriend, which I found quite strange, but it is what it is. So he was working with his girlfriend, and I said, hey, he actually called me over, and I was like, hey, how are you? I hadn't seen him in 5 years probably. And he said, this is really weird because we were trained on the adjudication process and they put us over here on the tabulators. So they weren't trained at all,
Right.
and they weren't even made aware that that's not where they were where they were working that night.
Right. Right. So this question, who trained them, the EIF? So it wasn't the EIF would be responsible for training poll watchers and challengers.
Yeah.
as a third party.
They're
But
city
who?
workers.
Yeah, so these are city employees that it was the city that was responsible for training them and hiring them. And also, I also many different sources said that they were almost exclusively Democrats that were working.
Oh yes, I mean the friend that I'm talking about is a known Democrat. He's a known Democrat. I've known him my whole life. His whole family's a Democrat. They're all Democrats. But I mean I know that about him, but I don't know anything else about any of the other workers.
Sure.
But
But,
I assumed they were though.
right.
Scott.
And to that point, I think it's just so important that we have trained Republicans working the polls. And so,
Absolutely.
and there is, I do believe that EIF and others do offer poll worker training,
Oh
kind
yeah.
of additional training in addition to whatever the city or the county offers wherever you are. But it's time to get that training now. And if you care about election integrity, you really should be working the polls. I mean, anybody who is listening, if you care about election integrity, now is the time to sign up and work for the polls and vote early so that you could do that. And so you can do it in Detroit, even if you don't live in Detroit. Detroit's really important. We know that it's kind of like Chicago. And Philadelphia. There's a long history of funny business in the Detroit city elections, and so it's important. So what would you say, Mellissa, what would you say were some of the biggest ways that the biggest red flags that you saw, the biggest concerns that you had after that?
Yeah. Well, Scott, it's that we didn't have the help that we needed. Our party, we didn't have the poll watchers, we didn't have the poll challengers, we didn't have Republicans working as election inspectors for the city, which they're supposed to hire. They're not supposed to just, they're not supposed to just hire all Democrats. They're supposed to be nonpartisan in that and hire whoever wants to work and is willing to be trained to do that. We didn't have attorneys there. We just didn't have the help we needed at all. And that is so, I mean, important, especially in this upcoming election, that we have the help that we need. I work for a private business, and I've already talked to my boss, and I told him, it's very important for me, like, to work the election. I will be working the election. So I'm going to have the day off. I mean, I'm fortunate to have a boss that does care, and he allows me to have that day off to work the election. But I mean, if you're working, there's 3 shifts you can work, and we have early voting here in Michigan.
Right.
So we have, there's 9 extra days that you can go poll watch or poll challenge, and just even you can get paid. You can be an election inspector and get paid to do it.
Right. What about the 4:30 a.m. van full of ballots that showed up? I mean, were you witness to that in any way?
So I saw the van pull up, and it was kind of weird because my boss, he is an employee with Dominion Voting, and probably still is, but I
Your
did see
boss,
it.
not now.
No, not anymore. Yes, thank you. But yeah, I did see it, and I was actually trying to address the issue of the city workers rescanning the ballots at the time that the van pulled in. And I started walking over to the garage door where the garage door opened, because the TCF Center, the counting room, is in the basement. So I started walking over there, and then I just turned around because it looked really shady to me. And I really was at the point where it was just getting concerning to be there.
Because of what way people were looking at you, or what caused you?
It was getting really loud in there. They started, pushing the Republicans out. That was right before they put the boards over the windows, the cardboard over the windows. My daughter was 4 months old at the time. My son was 4, and I just didn't really want to be in that environment anymore.
Mm. So that was in the main counting room where it was getting loud and they were putting the cardboard up.
Yeah,
Did you leave after that, or?
I did. Yeah.
And did you see any of those ballots as they were coming in
I
that?
didn't see the ballot from the white truck.
Okay.
From the white truck. No.
Did you see ballots that were mail-in ballots that were not folded?
Yes, I did. I did. I saw them all day and all night.
Okay, so there was a kind of a steady stream of them.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I mean, a mail-in ballot is no, it can't be a mail-in ballot if it wasn't mailed, right? I mean,
Yeah, if it's not folded, yeah. I mean, how did it get through the mail?
right,
Yeah. And actually, it took me a couple hours because, like I said, it was the first election I had ever worked. So it took me a couple hours to even think that these were mail-in ballots, like they're not folded at all.
Mhm.
And that was concerning, obviously, among other things. But I mean, that's just one of the things we really can't answer. At this point, we really can't answer because it's been past the amount of time where they can get rid of the ballots, and a lot of the counties have, and you know, I mean, that was an issue for sure.
Right, right. And that's another thing that we just need to have poll workers, that are working the polls, and
Yeah.
because poll challengers now in Michigan, you can't challenge, you
No.
can't challenge a ballot, and so you could talk to an attorney about it, but you can't stop the counting in any way. You can't actually challenge a ballot the way you could in 2020. So,
Yeah.
um, at least legally, they, from what I understand, they didn't really encourage ballot challenging even then. But
No, they didn't. But I think it's important too that we have people working that are able to control themselves, right? Like
yeah,
if something does happen, that we're able to write it down and write the ballot number down and remain calm and bring it up later at a later time. But I don't think challenging or getting any loud is the answer with us at all.
of course, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what we've got part of you sent me, do you want to look at the your testimony documents?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here, pull them up here.
Um so this was, and you were involved with, and this kind of brings us to Giuliani especially. What happened after the election? How did you get kind of involved in, how did you end up getting connected with Giuliani and with the Flynn camp? And
Yeah. So it's so strange. I was at home one day and I got a phone call and I answered it and it was Rudy. And I knew his voice. I've heard him on the news and TV for my whole life. I knew
right.
it was him, and I was just totally shocked. And he asked me to come to Lansing to testify with him and other witnesses. And I told him I would be there, and I went. That was it.
Did you meet with him in advance of that?
Yeah, actually. So myself and a couple other witnesses. And Jenna Ellis. So Rudy he was staying in a hotel. He had a desk in his hotel. We all went into his hotel, myself and probably three other witnesses and Jenna Ellis. And we briefly spoke about, what we witnessed, probably 5 minutes, and that was it.
So there really was no preparation beforehand as far as, talk about this, don't talk about that, or did they
No.
did they know your story very well, or was this just getting all the stories just told and put into the public? They didn't necessarily have a process of vetting the stories to.
You know what I think happened, Scott, is because there was 2 days of testimony, because now it's like it seems like it was forever ago. But so I testified in front of the state house first. Was it the state house? Yes, it was the state house first, or the Senate. But he saw me testifying the prior day on probably on TV, and then asked me after he heard my testimony is what it was.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So he didn't choose everybody that had testified.
No, 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 no.
Right.
He
And I
picked.
I
Mhm.
definitely thought at that time, as I was watching that, I really thought your testimony was the most powerful. And I think, and you became pretty famous after that. I mean, they did an SNL skit about you, and you know,
Yeah, yeah. And
I,
at the time, I had no idea that there was even media in that room.
oh wow,
Yeah, I would have never ever in my life thought that that would have blown up the way it did.
It was really remarkable. But I think, you were very genuine and real in your uh, in your responses, and
Yeah.
I think that really appealed to a lot of people. And I've talked to even Democrats that said that they liked you from the start. Um,
Mm.
um, so yeah, so that's it was, I don't know, it was I'm sure that for you that had to have been very unsettling, though, having that much attention and
It was life changing.
asked, and that it was, I'm sure
Hmm.
that's very
Yeah,
challenging.
it was totally life changing overnight. I woke up the next day and I probably close to a million messages on my Facebook, and it was crazy. Media at my house. I got doxxed on CNN um, with that cease and desist from Dominion Voting. Um, they put that on CNN with my address on it at the time. Yeah.
So then the media was camped out at your house, and
Oh yeah. It was terrible.
did you have to hire security?
No, no, I didn't. Nope, I didn't. I probably should have, to be honest, but I didn't. I
And
didn't.
you had, because there were rumors that you had worked with 1AP or First Amendment Praetorian, but you never did, right?
No, I never did. No, I had people call me and leave me messages on Facebook and offer to help, but I never really got back with any of them.
Um, and so what, as far as this testimony, where would you like to go with this?
Let me see which one you have up. Okay.
I have
Um,
I have one and two. Which one do you want to start
I'm
with?
up to,
Two?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oops.
Are there any highlights that you want to look at?
Uh, I'm just looking through it really quick. I do think it's important to note that a lot of the Dominion voting workers, so there was there was permanent employees for Dominion, and then there was contract employees like myself. But I was the only one in Michigan that lived in Michigan. There was like four contract employees at the TCF Center, but they lived in different states, which I thought was kind of strange.
So
Um,
these were employees that came from other states to Michigan for this
yeah,
election. Okay.
yeah, I just thought that was a little odd because I do IT work, and that's what I was hired for. And there was a guy he was a contract employee, and he had to have been 75, maybe even older. And he was from Tennessee, and he was hired for IT work to do IT work with Dominion. I just thought that was a little odd. I don't know, something to think about. Um, but another thing I saw while we're looking at this is the adjudication process is supposed to have one Democrat and one Republican judging ballots that are mismarked. Say you accidentally you filled in a hole for one candidate, and then you erased it and decided you wanted to vote for the other candidate. Well, it would go to the adjudication process, and then one Democrat and one Republican would judge that ballot and they have to agree that this is who the person was trying to vote for.
Right.
Well, instead of having a Democrat and a Republican working at these machines, it was people from the same party. And I had overheard a conversation with one of the machines, but I mean, it's just I don't think that it was just one machine that it was happening with.
Mhm.
Um, but that's really important to note as well. I mean, and it goes along with that there was no training, really no oversight of the workers. and no verification of party, which probably there should be somebody there that's verifying that there's a Democrat and a Republican judging the ballots.
Right. I interviewed Chris Shornack at the time, and he had been there as a poll challenger, and he said that he witnessed the same thing with overseas military ballots. He said he saw thousands of ballots where the way he described it, he said like that it was one person changing. It's supposed to be two people plus a challenger or two challengers from one from each party watching that process, because this is incredibly important. You got the overseas military ballot that's on a thinner paper that's mailed from overseas. Yeah. It needs to be transcribed onto an actual ballot form. And so they're copying the ballot. And when you're doing that, you have to have maximum transparency to make sure that you're being faithful to what the intent of the voter was. And they were watching, he was watching just one person, probably, just one worker, like they're cheating on a test, covering their work, as they were filling in ballots as quick as they could.
Yeah.
Setting to be transcribing military ballots and no idea how they were being transcribed. And so, and that is horrifying. We're talking about active duty military, but
it's crazy because we have a lot of military members. We have a lot of people in our military. I mean, that's a lot of ballots,
right.
For people to just go, to whatever candidate that they really weren't voting for. It's very important.
Right. And so, I think that one of the things, and I haven't talked a lot about election fraud, and I've kind of not talked about it intentionally because there's so many psyops in the area of election fraud. I talked about one of them before you came on, where they're trying to discourage people from voting on election day.
Yeah.
But on a deeper level, the whole idea that the fraud was in the machines. And I mean, you worked for Dominion, the company that produces the machines that's been most attacked especially by the Flynn Network and Joe Altman and everybody else, that the Dominion machines were flipping votes. Mm-hmm. And you also were an IT person, so I mean, you have quite a vantage point. Do you think that there was any vote flipping on the part of the machines? Do you think that
it's nothing that we can prove,
right?
Scott. It's nothing that we have solid evidence there to prove that. We do have solid evidence that we didn't have enough poll watchers, poll challengers, attorneys. We didn't, the process was, people weren't trained. We have other proof, to me, the machines are, I would say, they're probably an issue. They might be an issue, but I think we have bigger issues.
Right.
We have a lot bigger issues than the machines.
So what do you think, just in a nutshell, what do you think is the solution? What do you advocate as far as, what do we do?
Yeah. The solution is definitely for people to get involved. And if you want a fair election, then you have to be part of it. You have to volunteer your time, and help, because, we have to have a fair election, and we have to have a good amount of, poll watchers, poll challengers, even advocates that are there to help if we need replacements for people that are leaving, or have to leave, have something to do. I don't know. We have to have people. They have to be at every polling location, every counting center, especially like you said, Detroit. It is so important. We can't have just a couple poll watchers show up. We have to have the max amount that can get in there. And then we have to have replacements that are willing to fill their spots if they have to leave. Mm-hmm.
I definitely agree. So the and yeah, I think one other thing, I posted this on X the other day. I shared this. This is Jocelyn Benson. I'm just gonna. I think it's an interesting, about a minute.
Never apologize for doing everything I can to ensure every eligible citizen is registered to vote, and that involves partnerships. It involves partnerships with the Detroit Pistons. It involves partnerships with the Detroit Lions, with NASCAR, and yes, federal agencies.
I mean, just look at her. These are like the ultimate crazy eyes.
Yeah.
But so she's talking about the voter rolls, which I think is another problem that I've talked about, and it's one of those things that's very difficult to do anything about. Except, and this is one thing that Jovan Pulitzer said that I actually do agree with. If you know anybody that's been divorced in the last even 20 years, or has died in the last 20 years, you can look them up on your on the voter rolls to see if they're there as a registered voter, and if they are, then you should ask the clerk there to, in wherever they're registered, to remove them. And I think that's an important thing that we should do, because I know for a fact that does happen. I've talked to people who have seen their ex-wife of 20 years ago, who lives in another state, has another name, that voted in the 2020 and 22 elections.
Yeah.
So that's really important. And this is here she is defending in Congress. She's defending the her voter roll process. So that I want to finish just a minute.
Who, if they ask us to provide them a unique URL so that someone can register to vote through their website into ours, we will do that, because it's my responsibility and duty as the Chief Election Officer for the state of Michigan. And it's one of the reasons we are ranked so high in the nation for being one of the best states in the country for voting.
I'm not sure. I don't. Have you seen that before?
No, I have not seen that.
Do you have anything that you'd like to say about that?
I think she's a lunatic. She's an absolute lunatic. And yes, Michigan is known for our voter rolls being outdated and having so many issues with them. I mean, didn't she just get sued for that? I think she was sued for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it still hasn't been determined, and the clock is really ticking on that. And it was Michael Whatley with the RNC, the chair of the RNC, who was Trump's choice to succeed Ron McDaniel. And I think that's a good lawsuit from what I can tell. But it's just, unfortunately, it's getting slow rolled, and I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, but
yeah,
it is what it is. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about the Flynn camp. And so was it Pete Santilli that came to you first, as far as the?
Yeah, it was. Pete Santilli and I did trust Pete for a really long time. When you get involved in politics, I feel like you're just getting to know everybody, and it's really hard to know who's who, and to trust people, I feel. And that's where I was at when I met Pete. And I just feel like Pete ultimately introduced me to Roger Stone. And then I met General Flynn, which I don't. General Flynn was through Jovan Pulitzer.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
My good buddy Jeffrey Filioff. Which was his name before he lost $185 million in his investors' money on the QCAT, which he invented, which was named by Time Magazine as one of the 50 worst inventions of all time. So then he changed his name to Jovan Pulitzer instead of Jeffrey Filioff.
Man.
But I guess we've all got a past, don't we?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, there's a lot of them in politics. It's really crazy, to be honest.
Cartoon characters. It's amazing how many they're cartoon characters.
Yeah.
What kind of interaction did you have with Roger Stone?
Well, Roger was really he was really nice. He talked pretty often. Like, I could text him, I could call him, and he would answer. And it's still kind of like that till this day. Like, if I wanted to, I mean, I'm sure he would answer me, and he's a nice person. I just feel like there's a lot of drama there. There's a lot of drama that goes on in this circle.
There is, and they are. I think they are very nice, mm-hmm. as long as they're not necessarily nice to me, because I'm not really leading off with the right foot for them. But everybody that I've talked to that's had experience with them, they say, "Oh, they're the nicest people," and I am 100% sure that that is absolutely true, that they are very nice people.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen Jovan really lose it on some people,
Right.
a lot of people.
Yeah.
He was never like that with me. I knew not to really piss him off though, because I knew what would piss him off. And he was a hothead. But and Pete Santelli was like that as well. But yeah, they're all in the same circle.
Right. So when Pete had you on, and he started having you on like in what, right away, right? In
Oh yeah.
November of 2020.
Yeah.
So, and you were on pretty frequently.
Mhm.
And do you feel like he put you in, a positive light? Or did going on his show impact your ability to go on other shows, do you think? Or, how?
No, I don't think so. I think it put me in a very negative light. I think that it is the reason why I didn't get very far in politics, to be honest. And I could go through many reasons that, would be involved in that, but it's a lot of drama. And he doesn't verify anything that's being said to him. It's like he can like the person that's telling him something and just repeat everything they're saying without verifying it. And it's happened quite often with him. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of people that I just didn't really agree with in politics at the time, that I could say something to him and he would just broadcast it as if it were factual, you know, um, and I didn't have any proof.
Right.
It was constant.
Right. And there was a lot of that. I mean, they were slaying a lot of information without verifying it first. Just really, really poor journalism, to the extent that one would question whether or not it was intentional to be that.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
And so you said that kind of had a discrediting effect on you personally too.
Oh, it absolutely did. Yeah.
And do you think that might have been intentional to discredit you?
I mean, yeah, I do, because it's like I don't see how it couldn't have been. I mean, they've been in this industry for a very long time, and they know what they know, that they should be verifying information. They know, what can hurt a candidate. You know, even just a whistleblower, if that's how you want to refer to me, they know that this kind of stuff can discredit people.
Right.
And
right.
I feel like they should have known better,
Yeah. Well, especially Roger Stone, if he was involved from the beginning. And Roger Stone, he's involved in politics since Nixon. And
yeah.
So there are few people in the world that know better what it takes to have a successful whistleblower. You've got to have your ducks in a row. You've got to approach the right media. You've got to present the evidentiary case.
Yes.
And they did the exact opposite in every way. They put you out to the wrong media without the evidence. They didn't provide the evidence. They made all kinds of false claims. They allowed you to make false claims, even encourage that. And really, the net effect of that was it blew up not only your evidence, but also your own reputation.
Oh, for sure. Yes,
Yeah.
Absolutely. It did. And I do think about it a lot, and I wonder myself, is it intentional? And I mean, it has to be. It has to be intentional, because there's just no way that somebody can be involved for that long and not know how to, put evidence, that you have to back up what you're saying with
Right.
evidence and facts. And I had the evidence and the facts, Scott. It's just that they didn't want to put it up. They didn't really understand it, and that's the problem. They just didn't understand it, so they didn't want to talk about it. Which is kind of strange, because these are people that have been involved in politics for so long. Maybe it's because the states have different laws when it comes to elections, and they didn't want to learn them all. I don't know what it was, but I feel like they definitely do it on purpose. Absolutely.
Well, they were really heavily promoting the whole machine fraud narrative, right?
Oh, they still are.
Right. And I think that was a psyop from the very beginning, because if you can get people to believe that the elections are determined by the flip of a switch and there's no limit to how many votes they can steal, then that's a really effective tool for disenfranchising voters of one party. and
It
and then,
absolutely-
that's the reason why the 22, it was supposed to be a red wave and it ended up being a red trickle. And the reason was because of low voter turnout. And the reason for that was this machine fraud psyop. They're going strong with it even today. And when I talk to people that are out knocking on doors en masse, people who are running campaigns where there's thousands of people knocking on doors, this is a better way to get your finger on the pulse than by any poll, because they're actually talking to voters. And they say that the more rural and conservative the area it is, the more people you're going to get that are going to say, I don't plan to vote because there's no point, because it's all rigged. It's the machines. And, so you got Mike Lindell, you got, the whole network that was involved systematically in creating that false narrative. And like you said, there's no evidence to support it at all. It's not something that really can be proven. And they were clearly very careful to inject a ballot for the most part for every vote. And so, I think ultimately, because they really wanted, their big part of their thrust was to try to get Trump to sign the Insurrection Act. And had he signed the Insurrection Act, then Trump would have had, it really would have been an actual coup style, that they would have had a legitimate claim that it was a coup. He would have had the military take the machines, open them up. They wouldn't have found anything in the machines. They would have counted all the ballots by hand. They would have found that it was pretty much the same or exactly the same as what the machines put out. It would have completely destroyed his political career. It would have completely destroyed MAGA. And that's what Mike Flynn, Patrick Byrne, and Sidney Powell tried forcefully to do when they somehow got into the West Wing of in December, in that famous meeting with Trump and Mark Meadows and Pat Cipollone, and they were doing everything they could to convince Trump to sign that Insurrection Act. It would have destroyed him. It would have destroyed MAGA. It would have destroyed this country, and that's what they were clearly trying to do.
I totally agree.
So, and also, this is really what you're sharing is really, I've heard this from other sources, and I hope to bring them on as well. But so they were taking credible evidence like what you had. I think you were the most credible whistleblower of everyone, in my view, and in Michigan, because you actually worked for Dominion. You had access that most people didn't. You saw things that poll challengers and workers couldn't necessarily see themselves, because they were, seeing what you could see the whole picture. You saw a lot. And so you saw stuff that was real, and you saw stuff that wasn't real. And so your testimony was really, really important, and yet they didn't treat it as they should have treated it. And so they're discrediting good evidence and sweeping it under the rug. And then they're making up evidence out of thin air that supported the whole machine fraud narrative.
Right. Which, it's so upsetting to think back on too, because it's like, we should have had activists and people in our party, like just people in our party, I guess, higher up in our party, that came, called me and said, here, don't do media with this person here, just, and kind of guided a little bit, because I didn't have any of that. And I don't blame anybody for it, to be honest, Scott. It's just that, and I don't know if I would have listened anyways, to be honest, at that point. But because it became this thing where I didn't really trust anybody, I believe it was because of the way our elected officials were treating the witnesses. And I just couldn't believe it, and that was like my first indication that there was just something off, and from then on, I didn't really trust anybody, even in our party,
Right.
So I don't know if I would have listened, but we do need that. We really do, because we don't have any guidance, as, just getting thrown in there like that,
Mhm.
you know?
I would say that you can register on swampthevoteusa.com, and I'll put a link on the show notes and Substack. But you can register there. That goes straight to Trump Victory, and that's kind of their recruiting tool, to have people that are working the polls, and you can say what you want to do to help. and they'll direct you to information. So swampthevoteusa.com. It's a really good resource. The challenge in 2020 is that Trump's team was so heavily infiltrated. And like the director, I wrote a report about the director of election day operations, Mike Roman, who was a Koch guy. He had run they actually called it an intelligence organization, a private intelligence organization that had CIA guys, and he didn't do anything for to help on election day. He was supposed to have all these attorneys. There were 0 in Michigan.
Yep.
The RNC had 0 attorneys
Yep.
at TCF Center.
Yeah, I didn't see any.
No, and I've talked to Michonne Maddock. I talked to others who were leading. They're like, where's the RNC? Well, I guess we got to step up and try to lead something.
Yeah.
There were 0 resources from the RNC, which is also Trump victory. It's the same thing.
Right.
And so part of that can be blamed on Ronna McDaniel. Part of it can be blamed on Mike Roman, but really ultimately it goes to the infiltration, whether it was from the Kochs or from the Flynn camp or others within the deep state. It was just so heavily infiltrated. And it's pretty clear in interviews now that Trump recognizes that the extent to which that happened. And I think he really does have good people around him. And you can tell because all the Flynn people, they attack all the good people, that he's got all the time. They're constantly.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, which reminds me, like, when I was running for office, I did talk to, and I talked to you about this, to General Flynn, about his endorsement, getting his endorsement. And I think it's kind of crazy. Like, I never had spoken to him. Our conversation, and I have it. It's something I kept for my own self, but because I thought it was just so cool. But yeah, he never asked me any kind of questions like about my views. It was just he endorsed me right away, and I feel like it was because of my testimony, but I don't know. I just don't think that you can know somebody's views based off of their testimony,
Right.
I mean, he didn't know anything about me,
Right. And so you were running for the state house at that point, right?
Yes.
And that was in 22?
I think it was in 2020. It was the end of 2020, beginning of 21. Yeah.
Okay,
No,
so you were
January of 21.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you launched your campaign in January 21.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Or the 22 cycle.
Yes.
And so you were running against Josh Shriver there.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you mind sharing what you talked about with how Labadie gave you a call?
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. Yeah, he did. Mike Labadie called me one day. I had no idea who he was. No idea. He just called my cell phone, and I was used to people that I don't know calling me. It happened all the time because of, my testimony and being all over the news and all that. So it happened all the time. And he gave me a call, and he said he would like to work on my campaign. He was very pushy. Insisted that I help Josh Shriver. Kind of, I guess. I don't know. I guess just man up and talk about his opinions more, and then asked me if I would move over a district, and not run against him. And then he had proceeded to tell me that Christina was going to announce for Secretary of State, and that's how I found out. And he asked me if he could work on my campaign. I told him I would think about it, and I never talked to him again.
So, and he did reach out to you, and you obviously didn't reach out to him.
No.
And you didn't move over, so you did run against Shriver, and he ended up getting the nomination, and he's there even now. And so this is a pretty big deal. I don't think anybody else knew that. I had been suspecting that Shriver was working with Labadie.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he was working with Labadie from the very beginning. He was Labadie's guy in that race.
From the very beginning, yeah.
Was there anybody else that Mike mentioned that he was working with?
No, it was just him and Christina.
Okay.
And he was mentoring them and managing their campaigns. And I do want to point out that I didn't end up running against Josh because I ended up getting disqualified from the ballot
That's right.
very early on.
Signatures. Right.
Yeah. Well, no, not signatures. It was $100 fine that I didn't know was there. And I signed a paper or something. And you have to have that fine paid off before you do that. And I just wasn't aware of it.
Oh.
Hmm.
It came back, so that's good. At least it was at the end of a thought. So that is really fascinating about Mike Labadie, and I'm sure some people here in Michigan are going to be very interested in that. And I am going to reach out to Josh and ask him if he is still working with Mike, and we'll see what happens there. So, and if you're not in Michigan, if you're listening, Mike Labadie is really the reason why I'm doing any of this. I began researching the division within the Republican Party, and whistleblowers started coming to me about who had direct experience with Mike Labadie as the shadow operator with self-professed ties to the intelligence community, who was behind Christina Caramo and really running every major decision that she made as she was working to destroy the state party from within. And there are alleged ties, direct ties between him and Mike Flynn, and I find those very credible. But and further, there's a lot of ties with the America Project, and which is very much that is a Flynn vehicle. So, this is, and then so you got Flynn's endorsement in that race, and then you got. Did you have any involvement or any experience with Patrick Byrne in all that?
I did. I did that Reawaken America tour. I spoke at that. And I briefly saw him in a back room. We were all just standing there talking, like before the speakers were speaking, and he just disappeared. Like, he's very quiet, and I feel like he's very, he's an introvert in a way. And he kind of was just watching everybody in the room from the corner, and then he just like disappeared behind a curtain. And I thought that was kind of strange. And he has texted me a couple times. I'd have to go back and read what they're really about. I think it was about that bill in Michigan for a forensic audit. In about 2022 that we were trying to push through or look at the ballots, and he wanted involvement in that. And so did Jovan. It was a big mess.
Yeah, for sure. So that's interesting. So they were trying to get you to work with them in some way on that, or
yeah, Jovan started.
Okay.
He was trying to get funding from Patrick.
Okay. Okay. So, and it's really interesting because Jovan has claimed that he's not a part of the Flynn network. and yeah, which doesn't really make a sense because he actually introduced you to Roger Stone, and he obviously was working very closely with Patrick Byrne.
He's very close to General Flynn.
Yeah.
He's very close to him.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and it certainly was at that time through 22.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, he talked a lot about him, and you can watch his previous podcast from that time, where he talks about him all the time on his podcast.
Fascinating. Is any other were there any other like particularly noteworthy interactions that you had with anybody in that camp, or anything that you thought, oh, that's really, was there something that led you to disassociate with them?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it was just what you're saying. It's the fact that, I feel like they bring a lot of drama, and I feel like what they did with the election fraud caused us a lot of issues. By speaking about it and acting like they knew a lot about it, when these weren't even people that were involved in watching the election process. So I thought that was kind of strange. and it took years. It took years for me to actually understand who these people were, because I did trust them for some reason. But yeah, I just cut ties with them because there was a lot of drama, and I feel like they have really hurt a lot of people's reputations.
Yeah. Well, and they really destroyed the election integrity movement itself.
They
They took
did.
it and they discredited it just by being so crazy.
And they've
And
made a lot of money off of it too.
absolutely,
A
absolutely,
lot.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's wild. Got one question from Left of Center. Said, "Sorry, just joined. Can you say, Mellissa, if you originally reached out to the Trump campaign after being at TCF, or did Rudy reach out to you? You did kind of answer that, but I'll let you go ahead and summarize
Yeah.
it.
So Rudy reached out to me. I never reached out to anybody. You know, I wrote an affidavit and I called the FBI after the election, and that's it.
Did you
Yeah.
write that affidavit? And was it Patrick Kolbeck that was
Yes.
gathering those? So he
Mhm.
probably approached you. He was probably the first to approach
So
you.
yep. So Patrick Kolbeck is what he did is he was working, and I saw him working on election night, and I thought that I was looking around thinking, who can I talk to in here? Um, and I noticed that he was there for a really long time, and he was looking under the tables, like trying to see if like the wires led to an internet connection or anything like that. And later, I realized that he was part of the Republican Party, and he reached out to me, uh, and I did give him my affidavit. And I believe that Patrick gave me his spot to testify. I can't confirm that, but he was supposed to testify that day, and he did not end up testifying. And I testified when I wasn't supposed to, the first day before Rudy.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and do you have any other thoughts or anything else that you'd like to share, or anything that we missed?
I just think it's really important. No, I mean, we covered it. It is so important for people to work the election and to get involved. And no matter, I mean, really, no matter what side you're on, honestly. I mean, but in our party, we have to have the people involved. We have to have the challengers, and it's not that long of training. I know, like my own sister is like, I can't do that. It's too much. But no, we can do it. Everybody has to do it. We have to do it. If you guys want a free and fair election, and you want, to see um, the actual results, the real results, we have to work. We have to work that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Who counts the votes really matters, and if uh, we want to make sure that we have better elections in the future, and the only way to do that is to vote. And I think voting early is so important because it's a lot easier, frankly, than voting on election day. And we need to get numbers. We have to have sufficient numbers to overcome whatever fraud there's going to be in the election. The fraud is not going to be in Trump's favor, especially and so we have to, just like Trump says, we have to be too big to rig. We can be too big to rig if we all get out and vote. Don't let anybody tell you that there's no point in voting, that it's all just so hopelessly rigged. That's nihilism. Let's not go there. That's giving up, and we can't give up. We've got to fight, just like he says, and we fight by voting.
Right.
We fight by working the polls.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't vote, there's no chance. There's no chance, and that's like you said, like we've been talking about. I truly agree that is their goal. That was their goal all along. I believe that we have a lot of people in our party infiltrating our party, and that are here just to financially gain, to get recognition. A lot of people are about that. I could not believe that's another thing in politics I couldn't believe when I got in it, is just the adults that are craving attention. And it's always been that group. And it's very strange, but yeah, we have to go vote. We have to vote. You have to vote no matter what, but you should definitely be working.
Yeah. And get on the permanent AV voting list. If you're not there, you can. Here in Michigan, it's super simple. You just go to the Secretary of State website. You say there's a link right there under voting to vote early, and check the permanent AV checkbox, and they send you a mail-in ballot for every election, primary, special election, every election that involves you automatically. And if you have moved, make sure that they know you've moved. It's good to go back and you could do a search and see if any of your past addresses show up with the Secretary of State, and make sure that they are removed, and so that somebody isn't canceling out your vote by voting on your behalf in another address, because that could happen. I found my name in my first address that I lived in Michigan. I'm still registered to vote there in another township. That's something that is very real. We have some ability to clean up the voter rolls ourselves. We don't have to wait for the court. Just look through. It's all there on the Secretary of State's website. You can look at the voter rolls. You can talk to your local clerk, and all those things are very doable. And so that's part of being a citizen of this country, is we have to take responsibility, and we have to do the things that we can do. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got somebody's voter registration in the mail at my house. Somebody that lived here previously, and that's what I did. I just called the clerk and told her about it, and I sent it to her in the mail.
Good. So thank you so much for your example. Thank you for standing up. You took a lot of arrows, and your life got upended. And I think at every turn, I think you were genuinely and sincerely just trying to do the right thing by your country and by the state. And so I'm grateful for that. And I think a lot of people are too.
Oh, thank you, Scott. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
We'll be in touch. Thanks a lot. Thank you all for joining us. Until next time.
Have a good day.